Hi again. We reviewed Who Dares Wins by Tony Geraghty in the series on Special Forces recently, and while he was working on that book, he was giving a whole mass of photographs of all aspects of the regiment and throughout its history, and far too many to put into the book he had written. So he decided to publish a companion book which was more of an illustrated history, and it's this book. This is the SAS, and it's very heavily illustrated, obviously, but there's still a lot of text explaining the photos and also giving the background to what was going on at the time, the different campaigns. And as you can see, some terrific photographs, different aspects of the regiment's activities. So this book does cover the early history of the regiment, which Who Dares Wins didn't. So he starts with David Sterling. David Sterling, that's well known, was an officer in 8 Commando in the Middle East, and he was injured, and he came up with a concept that the commando idea was good, but it was large-scale operations, and he foresaw the need for small units doing very strategic raids, using all manner of infiltration methods, and trained and selected to a high level. So he was eventually given the go-ahead to form. It became started as L Detachment of the Special Air Service Brigade, which didn't exist, but it was one of these things to fool the enemy. And off they went, and they really saw it as being mainly parachute insertions. However, the first operation they did, 53 jumped and 32 were either killed or captured, which is a very inauspicious start, obviously, and it would probably have wiped out any other unit. One of the reasons I believe that the chaps were killed parachuting was the connection of the static lines to the cable within the aircraft was faulty, and it was a fault that had been discovered at Ringway, but they hadn't promulgated this out right through all the parachute training areas in the world. So parachuting was kept as an option, but then there was another unit, the Long Range Desert Group, which was a reconnaissance unit started by a chap who'd been an explorer, and they were into mobility operations, and they would go deep into the desert in special trucks and jeeps, and they very nobly agreed to be the transport for the SAS. So in that desert campaign, the armies, the British Army and the Desert Rats and the Africa Corps, faced each other on a very narrow front on the coast. So the idea was to go deep into the desert, around, and come up in the enemy's rear areas and cause havoc. And this they did. And then eventually the SAS gained its own mobility capability, got their own vehicles, and didn't have to rely on the good graces of the Long Range Desert Group anymore. And then they were renowned for such things as airfield raids, where they would either sneak in and put bombs on the aircraft, or they would roar in a jeep convoy, bristling with 5 machine guns per jeep, and brass up all the aircraft. And Paddy Mayne, who was one of the more senior officers in the setup at the time. It eventually became the commanding officer. Was renowned for doing this, and it's believed he actually destroyed more enemy aircraft than any of the RAF fighter pilots. He was probably the most under-decorated officer in the war, although he was very highly decorated. He deserved even more. He was an absolute terror, real warrior. So the book also goes into the SBS, which was operating in the Med and the Aegean. Now, the lineage between the wartime SAS and the modern SAS is so convoluted that I can't possibly start to describe it. Fortunately, a book has recently been written on this, and I've read it, and I will be reviewing it, and it's a fascinating book. Some of the things that those guys got up to during World War II are absolutely amazing. So I won't say any more on that at the moment. So after the war, the SAS was resurrected in Malaysia, or Malaya rather, and there's some pictures from that time. And one of the things they did was pioneer jumping into the jungle. And they became jungle experts. And really the jungle was the crucible of the modern SAS. And as I've said before, it's still part of the selection process. And then Jebel Akhdar, which was a totally different campaign, scaling the Jebel, the mountain, and in Oman, and defeating the insurgents who had captured it, or who were based up there. That was a notable operation as well. And then another jungle operation, Borneo. Some great pictures where helicopter operations featured quite a lot in Borneo, and also working with the indigenous people, and it was very, very successful. And again, the regiment learned lessons and came out of it with 3 squadrons, or 4 actually. Sorry, because the G squadron, I always forget G squadron, and was on the path that or it was starting on the path to its present. Along the way, they trained with US Special Forces over in the States, and that started an exchange program. The US Special Forces had certain skills and certain ways of doing things that the regiment found very interesting, and they incorporated that. And after they'd done that, that's when they set up the troop specific roles, free fall, boat, mountain and mobility. So another big one was Operation Storm out in Dhofar, and again lots of pictures and lots of descriptive, where I just found I had actually earmarked it. Operation Storm. And then more modern times, obviously with counter-terrorism, the embassy siege, seen on television, and into the present day. And the book covered the Falklands, which had recently happened when it was published. So lots and lots of good photos. Young Joe in Dhofar, and it's a really good companion to the previous book, and it's still a very, very worthwhile addition to the Special Forces Library. mainly because of the picture content. None of the pictures, as far as I can remember, have the faces blacked out and that, because it's all historical stuff, and all of guys who had left the regiment by then. I think they must have examined the photos for that. But Tony Geraghty, you know, really did the job again with this book, and it's well worth reading.